Welcome to Module 13. We are going to go a little bit deeper into motivational interviewing here. We're going to do some more work around change talk and preparing for change, and then we're going to take a dive into planning for change, and then we're going to pull everything together at the end of this module. So motivational interviewing posits that there are two kinds of talk that you need to listen for. Change talk, we've been talking about, all of the darn motivators, desire, ability, reasons, need that you're going to hear as your clients talk through change, but also sustain talk. So that's the flip side, and that's when your clients are making arguments against change. So a statement that contains both kinds of talk might be, I really need to lose weight, but losing weight is so difficult. I think I'm just going to not work on this right now. So the first part of that statement was clearly change talk. I need to lose weight, right? There's energy behind that. And the second part is, but losing weight is so hard. And so that's kind of just, I'm going to stay in place for a while. You're going to be listening for both of these. And your job is to, number one, evoke and explore change talk. So we've talked a lot about how to do that in the last module. We're going to talk more about how to do that in this module. But at the same time, you want to acknowledge the sustain talk. You want to say something, a reflective statement like, I hear that for you, losing weight feels like a really difficult challenge. And acknowledge it. Don't just ignore it, but definitely don't run with it. You want to be running with the change talk. So I've assigned a handout for this module that's a tremendously helpful overview of all sorts of strategies to get to change. And you can use this handout for your triads that you may have done last week, you may be doing this week. But this handout really lays out a few things that I'm gonna also go into in this module. And so as we talked about in the last slide, your work as a coach, as a counselor, is evoking and really tipping the scale towards change. And you do that by noticing the darn motivations as they're spoken. We talked about desire, ability, reasons, and need, and commitment, all sorts of statements that your clients will make about their preferences for change, their self-capacity, specific arguments for change, or about feeling obligations to change. So you're going to be really using questions to help move those statements forward. What do you mean by this? What are your intentions? What do you hope to see? We also talked about using importance and confidence and using rulers. So how important is this for you to begin this exercise routine? How confident are you that you can get started next week the way you described wanting to? All sorts of strategies you can use to weigh importance and confidence. And last week there was a handout on kind of deepening your skills in importance and confidence. So to move forward a little bit and add a few extra strategies, the handout that you've been provided with talks about querying extremes, looking back, looking forward, exploring goals and values. Just a few strategies to help tip the scale towards change. So when you're querying the extremes, you're trying to get a sense of what the extreme picture of life would look like if you choose not to change. And if you do change, what are the best outcomes possible for you? And getting people to really think about, really those are pros and cons of changing, but they're really kind of best case and worst case scenario. Looking back is another strategy. Looking at past experiences. Do you remember a time when you weighed a good weight for you? What was it like then? So explore that. What were things like before you stopped exercising? What are the differences between Jane of 10 years ago and the Jane of today? How has your weight stopped you from doing things you might want to do? So looking at past experiences as a way for your clients to really argue for change. And you can also look forward as a strategy for doing that. If you, for example, if you make a change in your diet, what do you hope to be different? How could things be 10 years from now? It seems like you're anxious about how things are with you now. How would you like things to be different? Suppose you don't make any changes and just continue as you are now. What do you think your life will be like 5 years from now? So those strategies of looking back and looking forward can really help people articulate what it is that they saw themselves being in the past and what they see themselves possibly being in the future. You can also explore their goals and values. So what's important to you about losing weight? What are the important things that you're missing out in your life because of your weight right now? What is your vision of life if possibly you could lose that weight? And how does that tie in with what's important to you? So really kind of working through the goals and values with them. And one goal in doing that is identifying discrepancy between what they're expressing their goals and values of the future to be and what their current behavior is, and being able to point out that discrepancy. So if you're using importance and confidence to help tip the scale towards change, this little image could be really helpful for you. So here you can see in square one, the client tells you that there's high importance and high confidence in the change they want to make. This is the ideal situation. It doesn't happen very often. It means that they're ready to move forward into the planning stage, and you can assist them with that and be pretty assured that they're going to be able to carry through the plans that they're making. In square two, the importance is low to them, but their confidence that they could do it is high. You really need to check in if that's the focus that they want to take on and begin planning with. Because if it's not that important, it may not be that worthwhile. On the other hand, if they need to build confidence and get some quick wins, then taking something that, even if it's low in importance, but it's high in confidence, they can make some quick changes and build confidence. That might be a useful thing to follow through with them on. For square three, importance is high and confidence is low. And in square four, importance is low and confidence is low. So square three is probably most typical of what you'll run into. They're defining a problem that's really important to them, but they're just not feeling confident about it. And this is why they haven't made change before. And even in square four, if it's the importance is low and the confidence is low, but they're really still wanting to work on it, you can move forward with them. And there, in the next slide, I'm going to talk about some strategies to help them build confidence. But if you identify folks in squares 3 and 4, if that's where you are with them, your focus really needs to become how to help them build their confidence. So when you hear that your clients are having low confidence and you have agreed that the topic or issue or change is important enough for them to move forward, your focus then becomes to support them in building confidence. So there are a few strategies that you can use in order to do this. The first is to identify and affirm strengths. So using the tool of affirmation that we know so well, ensures that they're moving towards the positive, they're identifying the strength. So you might pull out something that they've said in the past, like, and reflect it. Wow, it sounds like you're pretty good at helping others, for example. And how can you use that strength in order to help yourself move forward? So you're going to ask for elaboration and you're going to follow with reflective listening in that case. Another strategy is to review past successes. So you could ask a question like, what changes have you made in the past that were difficult for you? How did you do with that? What obstacles were in the way? And, find out from the client what they attribute to their success and use that and acknowledge that and help link that in with whatever plans or action steps your client makes in the future. Brainstorming is also a helpful strategy. So this is where you can freely generate ideas for change together. You could start by asking the client if they had some ideas about affecting particular change. And sometimes they don't. They're really stumped, and that's why they haven't come up with anything. And so you could ask permission to throw out an idea, for example. And after you throw out an idea, maybe ask for her. Ask for an idea from your client. Or, you could kind of popcorn out brainstorm ideas. You could have fun with it. This doesn't have to be a serious thing. You could ask for pie in the sky. Best case scenario, what would you do in order to change that behavior? You could even have your client write down some ideas. So different ways to use brainstorming, but that kind of gets them unblocked and just, they will identify with something that comes out of that brainstorming session and can try it out. The concept of reframe is something that we talked a lot about in our positive psychology chapters. As a coach, you can help your client reframe issues that are coming up. So, for example, the client that complains that giving up sugar was harder than she thought. She tried giving it up for Lent, but then 2 weeks later she was consuming more. So she tells you she feels like a failure, and you can use her experiences to help her rethink what this is all about. So she views sugar as the enemy, right? She just wants to eliminate it, get rid of it from her life. But perhaps you can have a conversation about different ways to look at sugar. What does sugar offer her? What's important about sugar to her? And perhaps giving her an idea that she has volition in how much sugar she consumes, as opposed to believing that, sugar controls her. You can have a conversation about, how might you take a little bit of control back from the sugar? What does choice look like then? How can sugar look like a friend instead of an enemy? Any of these ways are useful for clients to help just slightly shift their perspective and work with that. And then the last suggestion is using hypothetical thinking. So hypotheticals can be really effective for less ready patients or clients. It allows them the freedom to envision change. You're not saying they're going to be doing it. It means let's just think about, some interesting scenarios. So questions might include, what might it take for you to make a decision to walk more regularly? What might it take? It's a might question. It's not what is it going to take? Or if you did make a change and lost 10 pounds, what might be some benefits? Or suppose you did decide to cut down on smoking. How would you go about it? How might you go about it in order to succeed? You could take imaginative leaps as well and think about what kind of currently impossible thing might change everything or anything. What's currently impossible for you that could help. So there are a whole range of strategies to help your clients build confidence. Ideally, this is helping them realize that there are ways to go about making the change, potentially reframing their perspective, and then knowing that they have strengths and successes to call upon in making these changes. So moving from evoking to planning, when do we do that? How do we make this decision? So the first thing we learn is that the frequency and strength of change talk is going to be greater than the frequency of sustained talk. You're going to hear the momentum moving, and you're going to know that the change talk is building and it's time to get into planning. Another thing you might see, and this is going back to the trans-theoretical model, is that you see the client is transitioning from contemplation to preparation stage, not just thinking anymore, but thinking about preparing for action now. You may also see signs of resolve, and this may require you to rely a little bit more on intuition. You may kind of see or feel emotion that's coming on. I'm ready to do this, or look in your client's eye or look in their face. And so reading their body language can help you get at some of these signs. And then envisioning statements. You might hear things like, imagine what it would be like to go to my high school reunion feeling good about my weight. So they're really, they see the worth of making the changes, and they can communicate that. And this is more kind of from the clinical perspective, but they may be asking questions about change. So how would losing my weight affect my blood pressure? They're really mulling over it. What are the benefits of change? So different ways when it's time to move into planning. And when you do notice that it is time to move into planning, check it out with your client. Ask them, do you think it's time to start preparing some steps here? Is it time to enter into the planning process? Summarize for them their change talk. What I'm hearing is blah, 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 and blah. Does that sound right to you? And then ask a key question. So where does this leave you now? And let them communicate, that, okay, I'm ready to take a step now. And silence, we haven't talked much about silence. I know you're going to be talking about this more in COA 610, but silence is a really useful tool to just make sure that there is space for them to add what needs to be added. So give them some of that space to be able to talk about where they are and where they feel like they need to go at that time. So the authors of the 2013 Motivational Interviewing book, in one of the chapters I assigned, suggest that there may be 3 ways to proceed with your client. They may have a clear plan in mind. They may know exactly what they want to do. They may have multiple ideas of what they could do, or you could brainstorm together multiple options, or you may be developing a plan from scratch. So it's useful to know where you are as you move into that planning stage. So if there's a clear plan, you're going to be eliciting from them what are the steps that they see taking in order to do this. You're going to kind of consolidate the plan or do a nice summary of what they've said. You're going to ask them further questions to mobilize change talk. So it might be, how ready are you to do that? Or even asking for commitment. Is this really what you intend to do? I would suggest, and of course we're going to come back to the SMART formula, but I would suggest checking in, either kind of checklist in your own mind or actually opening up the questions to make sure that the action steps follow the SMART formula. Is it specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timed? You can always just ask those questions. It's really important to be able to troubleshoot. There is always something that's going to get in the way of a best laid plan. So spend a little time with them thinking about contingency plans. Well, what might throw you off course? Why might this not work? What could you put in place in case X, Y, and Z happen? So troubleshoot up front. They'll be a lot more prepared when that time comes. And then try to go as specific as possible with them. Walk them through their average day. If, for instance, they're thinking about adding some exercise to their routine, and go specifically into their day. So your alarm wakes you up at 5:30. You've laid your gym clothes out. You have a banana in your kitchen ready to go, right? I mean, it takes that level of specificity to ensure that they can actually make this change happen. I think it's Sean Acor who talks about this in terms of activation energy. So if you can decrease the activation energy it takes to make this change, you're going to totally increase the likeliness that they'll do it. So being specific, laying out the plan, getting the contingency plan in place. So when there are multiple options, it's going to be a slightly different process. You may be brainstorming with them. They may come up with multiple options. You're going to ask them to select which one is most likely that they'll succeed at, which one they'd like to take on, which one makes most sense to them. So make sure you get on the same page about what they've decided. What exactly is the goal, and what are the action steps they need to get there. You're going to itemize, you're going to summarize that plan for them. Again, you're going to walk through the same steps as I just mentioned above. When there's a clear plan, you're going to make sure that the action steps follow the SMART formula, and you're going to do the troubleshooting and getting really specific with them. You're going to try to decrease the activation energy. And then when there's the need to develop a plan from scratch, this again is going to require brainstorming. This may be drawing from past successes. Well, what did you do in the past that worked and didn't work? Trying to make sure with them that they're the ones, for the most part, conceiving the plan. And if it takes multiple sessions, perhaps giving them homework about, look at multiple options and think about how this might work. then that might be required. But once they've been able to identify which one they want to start with, again, it's following the process for when there's a clear plan above, consolidating the plan, asking the questions to mobilize change talk, and asking for commitment, checking about the SMART formula, troubleshooting, and getting more specific with them. I couldn't help myself but bring the SMART goals formula back up. It's just so important that you kind of keep this in your mind, because it's a real oversight if you cannot get specific enough with these folks, or if if they set plans that really aren't attainable. So it's just super important that you keep these in mind. And I added a note that says goals should be set within a 3 to 6 month time period in mind. So giving them enough time to work through those goals and setting up the specific action steps that will help them ensure, that they'll be successful within that time frame. So warning, once again, we've talked about this. We talked about this in the stages of change modules, but, moving too fast towards goal setting and planning can set your clients up for failure if they're not ready, and for many reasons, including leading to discouragement and decreasing confidence. So really spending time in that evoking stage is going to reap great rewards. Don't rush into the goal setting and planning stage. Do the work with change talk, and then take your time as you're going through the planning stage too. As I had mentioned before, the specificity within their particular lives. What does the average day look like? And what is realistic for them? It's important to kind of slowly work through that process. And here we see the process model again for motivational interviewing. Here you can see we're in that last and top rung, which is planning. And I added some little pieces to this model now to kind of pull this together. So engaging, which is the process of developing the working partnership, is the question of, should we travel together? Shall we journey together? Shall we do this together? Focusing, which is identifying a particular agenda, is where to? Where are we going to go on this journey? Evoking, which is eliciting motivation for change, is whether we should do it and why we should do it. And planning, which is the stage we're in, is how are we going to do it and when are we going to do it? Much more concrete. So you have gathered a lot of skills and tools together in the last few modules for being a really stellar motivational interviewing. And it's going to take practice to integrate these skills. Just using the skills of listening and reflecting and summarizing, might be enough in and of itself, but then you have a whole process that you're guiding your clients through and a whole series of strategies around collecting change talk. So just know that this is a process that's going to develop over time. You can use bits and pieces in your everyday conversations. You can practice them at home. You can, do formal motivational interviewing sessions with your colleagues and friends as well. But I put together 2 slides that kind of walks you through kind of what a general motivational interviewing session probably should include. And so I'm just going to kind of read through these with you. So the first is, once you've developed that rapport, it's really setting an agenda with your client. What are they there to do? Each session needs to have its specific focus. You're going to be collecting darn statements, asking about your client's desire, ability, reasons, and need, and commitment towards making change. So it's really gathering change talk. You're going to follow all of your questions by these critical skills that you're learning: listening, reflecting back, and maybe anticipating what might lie beneath the surface of what you heard. Really listening to their body language, listening to the inflection in their voice, but also reflecting, offering summaries, letting them correct you if it's wrong, letting them get really clear on what you're saying. You're ultimately listening for the flowers of change talk. So tuck them away and offer them in a bouquet summary. List them out. This is what I'm hearing you say. And again, let them argue themselves into making the change. When you hear commitment language coming from them, ask them questions like, what are you willing to do? So that's when they're moving from contemplation to preparation. And encourage them to think about, what are you ready for? If the client's not ready for commitment, then continue exploring the darn themes. Continue exploring the pros and cons of change. And continue exploring their past and present experiences, their past experiences and kind of future vision. Continue exploring their values. Plenty to do until you hear that commitment language. If or when your client is ready, then you move into developing a change plan with them. So just to bring back this notion of you as a healing presence, it's really important that you acknowledge your healing presence and the importance of everything you bring into this session, and how this can therapeutically impact your clients. So I've said multiple times before, it's really important that you are guiding the process. And again, back to the beginning of our modules in motivational interviewing, the guiding style really helps to do that. Now I think knowing where you're going with all this, you can understand why the guiding style is really the most effective. Of course, listening, great, perhaps in early when you're just kind of trying to figure them out, hear where they're coming from. Sometimes if they're asking you for some information, using that directing style might be useful. But in general, you're using the guiding style and you're guiding the process, and you're trusting your client to provide the content. They are the experts on their lives. And then being in the moment with the client, presencing. You learned a lot about that in COA 601. So being in that moment with them will really help you picking up meaning behind the language. It will help you in really being able to identify where to go next, kind of sensing what that next step is. So presencing is so important in motivational interviewing. And then skillfully listening and guiding really conveys a message to your client of authentic acceptance, hope, and compassion. And these elements are in and of themselves therapeutic for your client. So cultivating those within yourself and bringing those into the session will really be in the service of your client.